Maya Johnson drove 3 hours to reach the Riverside Public Shooting Range on a Tuesday morning. The facility was equipped with military-grade equipment and professional instruction, though it typically served weekend hunters and recreational shooters. However, this day was different because the 10th Mountain Division was conducting advanced marksmanship training for their elite reconnaissance unit. Maya parked her modest Honda Civic between two large military trucks, feeling somewhat out of place in her simple jeans and navy blue sweater. A coworker had recommended this range as the best place to learn proper shooting technique, though they had failed to mention she would be sharing the facility with some of the most skilled marksmen in the United States Army. The main building was bustling with activity as uniformed personnel transported equipment and inspected weapons. Maya walked up to the front desk where a stern-looking man with sergeant stripes looked up from his paperwork. She explained that she wanted to use the rifle range and had called the previous day about beginner instruction. Sergeant Collins examined her with barely hidden amusement, seeing a soft-spoken, polite woman around 29 years old who definitely did not appear to be military material. He mentioned that she had chosen an interesting day since Army training exercises would be running all morning and might be quite loud for a beginner session. Maya quietly replied that she did not mind the noise. Collins handed her a clipboard to fill out and asked if she had ever fired a rifle before. She answered that she had done so once or twice. The sergeant assigned her to Lane 12, the furthest position from the military training area, and informed her that Instructor Mitchell would be with her in 15 minutes, adding that she should try not to get overwhelmed by all the commotion. Maya proceeded to the designated lane and found the range impressive. 50 shooting positions stretched across a concrete floor with targets positioned at various distances reaching up to 1,000 meters. The military section was active with soldiers practicing complex shooting scenarios under the supervision of their instructors. She could not help but notice the precision of their movements and the absolute confidence with which they handled their weapons. These were not weekend hobbyists but professionals who had spent years perfecting their craft. A middle-aged man approached with a rifle case, introducing himself as her 10 o'clock appointment. Instructor Mitchell had the weathered appearance of someone who had spent decades around firearms, though his civilian clothing suggested he was no longer active military. Maya thanked him for accommodating her on such a busy day. Mitchell opened the case to reveal a standard training rifle, a Remington 700 with a basic scope. He asked what had motivated her to try rifle shooting, noting that most beginners started with handguns. She explained that she wanted to challenge herself with something more precise. Mitchell handed her safety glasses and ear protection and said they would start with the fundamentals, asking if she had ever held a rifle before. She replied that she had a few times but never anything this sophisticated. As Mitchell began explaining proper stance and grip, the military training area erupted in coordinated gunfire. Maya glanced over to see soldiers engaging multiple targets in rapid succession with fluid and practiced movements. Mitchell noticed her attention and told her not to worry about them, explaining that those soldiers were showing off for their colonel, and they should focus on getting her comfortable with the basics. For the next 20 minutes, Mitchell covered safety protocols, breathing techniques, and sight alignment. Maya listened intently, asking occasional questions that demonstrated surprising understanding of the principles involved. Mitchell finally said they should see what she could do and that they would start with a target at 100 meters, telling her to take her time without pressure. Maya positioned herself at the shooting bench, settling the rifle against her shoulder with movements that seemed almost natural. She peered through the scope, made a small adjustment to the parallax setting, and lined up her shot. Mitchell coached her to remember steady breathing and gentle trigger pull with follow-through. Maya nodded, took a breath, and held it halfway. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that barely registered above the ongoing military exercises. Mitchell raised his binoculars and studied the target, his eyebrows shooting up in surprise. He exclaimed that it was a dead-center bullseye and supposed it was beginner's luck. Maya calmly asked if they could try a further target. Mitchell agreed and moved it to 200 meters. The second shot was equally impressive, then 300 meters. Each bullet found its mark with mechanical precision that made Mitchell increasingly suspicious. He told her that he had been teaching marksmanship for 30 years and had never seen a beginner shoot like this, asking if she was sure she had not had professional training. Maya replied that she was sure, though something in her tone suggested there was more to the story. By this time, their shooting had attracted attention from nearby lanes. A few soldiers had wandered over during their break, curious about the civilian who was consistently hitting targets that challenged even experienced marksmen. Staff Sergeant Brooks called out to Mitchell, joking that his student was making them look bad. Mitchell forced a laugh and attributed it to natural talent. Private Torres muttered that natural talent was nonsense and that nobody shot like that without serious training. Maya seemed oblivious to the growing attention, focused entirely on her shooting. When Mitchell suggested moving to the 500-meter target, she simply nodded and made another small scope adjustment. Brooks commented to his squad that this was getting ridiculous, noting that he had been shooting competitively for 8 years and could barely hit 500 meters consistently. The military training exercise had effectively stopped as more soldiers gathered to watch the mysterious civilian. Even the instructors were taking notice, though they tried to maintain professional distance. Colonel Blake had been observing the training from the elevated observation deck when his aide, Lieutenant Carter, approached with a concerned expression. Carter informed him that there was an unusual situation developing on the civilian side of the range. Blake asked what kind of situation, and Carter explained that there was a woman shooting better than their best marksman. Blake lowered his binoculars and looked where Carter was pointing. At lane 12, he could see a small crowd of soldiers gathering around a civilian shooter. Blake said it was probably just luck or that she had some training she was not admitting to. Carter mentioned that she had just hit a bullseye at 500 meters on her first attempt at that distance. This got Blake's attention since he had commanded elite units for 15 years and knew exactly how difficult such a shot was, even for trained professionals. He decided they should take a closer look. As they descended to the range floor, Blake could see the growing buzz of excitement among his soldiers. Word was spreading quickly that something extraordinary was happening at the far end of the range. Maya, meanwhile, remained focused on her shooting. Mitchell had given up any pretense of instruction and was simply observing in amazement as she consistently hit targets that should have been impossible for someone of her claimed experience level. Mitchell quietly told her that she needed to tell him who she really was. Maya looked up from the rifle with an unchanged expression and said she was just someone who wanted to learn to shoot better. Mitchell insisted that nobody learned this fast. Before Maya could respond, a commotion arose near the military section as Colonel Blake strode across the range floor with an intense and focused expression. The crowd of soldiers parted as he approached lane 12. Blake introduced himself as Colonel Blake from the 10th Mountain Division and said he would like to know who was responsible for this shooting. Mitchell straightened instinctively in the presence of senior military leadership and introduced Maya Johnson as his student. Blake studied Maya carefully, taking in her civilian appearance and calm demeanor, and mentioned that he understood she had been hitting some impressive targets. Maya replied simply that she had been learning. Blake's tone suggested he did not quite believe it as he asked if she would mind if he observed her next shot. She said she did not mind. The entire range had gone quiet now, with even the ongoing military exercises stopping as word spread that a colonel was personally investigating the civilian shooter. Maya seemed unaware of the attention as she prepared for her next shot. Mitchell had set up a target at 600 meters, a distance that challenged even expert marksmen. Maya studied the target through her scope, made a minute adjustment for wind drift, and settled into position. The shot rang out across the suddenly silent range. Blake immediately raised his binoculars and scanned the distant target. What he saw made his blood run cold. It was a perfect center hit, not just on target or in the bullseye, but dead center with surgical precision. Blake slowly lowered his binoculars, his mind racing through possibilities. In his 15 years of military service, he had seen shooting like this exactly 3 times, and all 3 shooters had been members of classified special operations units whose very existence was denied by official channels. He leaned close to Lieutenant Carter and whispered urgently to get him a secure line to the intelligence division, saying that he had seen that shooting pattern before. Carter looked confused and pointed out that she was just a civilian. Blake stared at Maya, who was calmly checking the rifle's action after her shot, and said that she was not. The next few minutes passed in tense silence as Carter made the necessary calls. Blake continued observing Maya, noting details he had missed initially. Her grip on the rifle was textbook perfect, her breathing control was that of someone with advanced training, and most telling of all, her complete composure under pressure suggested experience in high-stress situations. Mitchell, meanwhile, had given up any pretense of normal instruction and asked Maya directly if she was or had ever been military, law enforcement, or a professional competitive shooter. Maya answered no to all questions. Mitchell asked how she explained this and gestured at the target board, now peppered with perfectly placed shots. Maya considered her answer carefully and said that some people had natural ability. It was then that Lieutenant Carter returned with information that changed everything. Carter quietly told Blake that the Intelligence Division wanted to speak with him immediately and said to tell him that Operation Nightfall protocols were in effect. Blake felt his stomach drop at the mention of Operation Nightfall, which was the code designation for tracking down former members of a classified program that officially did not exist. The program had trained fewer than 50 individuals over the past decade, individuals whose skills were so specialized that their identities were protected at the highest levels of government. Blake looked again at Maya Johnson, seeing her now with completely different eyes. The quiet civilian appearance, the modest demeanor, the casual clothes, it was perfect cover for someone who needed to disappear completely. Blake said carefully that he wondered if they might speak privately. Maya looked up from the rifle, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. In that moment, Blake saw something that confirmed his suspicions. Behind the quiet exterior was a sharpness, an awareness that belonged to someone who had been trained to see threats before they materialized. Maya said she did not think that was necessary, but Blake insisted it was. The standoff lasted perhaps 10 seconds, though it felt much longer. Finally, Maya nodded and set down the rifle. Blake asked Mitchell if he would mind giving them some space. Mitchell looked between them uncertainly and asked if there was a problem. Blake replied that there was no problem at all, just a conversation between old soldiers. Maya's eyes flicked to Blake sharply as she reminded him that she had told him she was not military. Blake agreed that she was not. They walked to a quiet corner of the range, away from the curious soldiers and confused instructors. Blake waited until they were completely alone before speaking. He said quietly that the shooting pattern she had just demonstrated was taught in exactly one place, a facility that did not exist to students who officially were never trained. Maya said nothing. Blake continued, explaining that the program was shut down 2 years ago after a security breach and all participants were relocated with new identities, with most of them disappearing completely. Maya still said nothing. Blake said he was going to make an educated guess that someone very highly placed in the intelligence community decided she needed to vanish, giving her a new name, a new background, and explicit instructions to never demonstrate her real capabilities. Maya finally spoke, saying he was suggesting she was someone she was not. Blake replied that he was suggesting she was exactly who she appeared to be, Maya Johnson, civilian, but that he was also suggesting that was not always her name. The silence stretched between them. In the distance, the military exercises had resumed, though Blake could see soldiers still glancing in their direction. Maya said finally, speaking hypothetically, that if someone had been trained in the way he was describing and if they had been given a new life for their own protection, what would happen if their cover was blown? Blake replied that hypothetically, they would be relocated again with a new name, new background, and new life, and the process would repeat until they found somewhere they could truly disappear. Maya nodded slowly and said that sounded exhausting. Blake agreed that he imagined it would be. He made a decision that would have significant consequences for both of them, saying that as far as his official report was concerned, she was a remarkably talented beginner who impressed everyone with her natural ability and nothing more. Maya studied his face, looking for deception, and asked why he would do that. Blake replied that sometimes the best soldiers were the ones who got to retire quietly. The relief in Maya's eyes was almost imperceptible, but Blake caught it. In that moment, he knew he had made the right choice. However, he continued, he did have one request. Maya asked what that was. Blake explained that his unit could use someone with her natural talents, not for active duty of course, but for consulting work and training exercises, the kind of thing that kept skills sharp without requiring official status. Maya considered this, speaking hypothetically that she might be interested in that kind of arrangement. Blake smiled for the first time that day and said he thought she might be. They returned to Lane 12 where Mitchell was fielding questions from increasingly curious soldiers. The instructor looked relieved to see them return and asked if everything was sorted out. Blake replied that it was completely sorted and that Miss Johnson had agreed to help them with some advanced training scenarios, purely voluntary of course. Mitchell said that was outstanding, though he clearly did not understand what had just transpired. Maya picked up the rifle again, checking the scope alignment with practiced efficiency. She asked the colonel if he would like to see what this equipment could really do. Blake grinned and said he thought she would never ask. What followed was a shooting demonstration that left every soldier on the range speechless. Maya engaged targets at distances and under conditions that challenged the limits of the equipment itself. She shot moving targets, targets obscured by obstacles, and targets in rapidly changing light conditions. But more impressive than her accuracy was her teaching ability. As she worked, she quietly explained techniques and principles that even the most experienced marksman had never encountered. She demonstrated advanced breathing methods, unconventional shooting positions, and mental focus techniques that transformed good shooters into exceptional ones. During one particularly challenging sequence, Maya demonstrated something that made even Blake question what he thought he knew about marksmanship. She engaged 3 separate targets at different distances in rapid succession, with each shot requiring different calculations for wind drift and bullet drop. The entire sequence took less than 15 seconds and all 3 shots hit dead center. Staff Sergeant Brooks asked during a brief break where she had learned to shoot like this. Maya paused in cleaning the rifle and said simply that it was practice, lots and lots of practice. It was not exactly a lie. The afternoon session revealed even more of Maya's capabilities. She demonstrated night vision shooting techniques, showed how to compensate for extreme weather conditions, and taught advanced range estimation methods that did not require laser rangefinders. Each lesson was delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who had applied these skills in real-world situations. Most remarkably, she seemed to understand exactly what each soldier needed to improve their shooting. She adjusted her teaching style for each individual, recognizing that some learned better through visual demonstration while others needed detailed technical explanations. Private Wilson, who had struggled with long-range accuracy throughout his military career, found himself hitting targets he had never dreamed possible after Maya showed him a subtle adjustment to his breathing rhythm. Corporal Henderson discovered that a minor change in his grip pressure transformed his shooting consistency overnight. Private Garcia whispered to his squadmate that it was like she could see inside their heads and knew exactly what they were doing wrong before they did. By the end of the day, Maya had fundamentally changed how the 10th Mountain Division's reconnaissance unit approached marksmanship training. She had introduced concepts and techniques that would improve their effectiveness for years to come. As the soldiers packed their equipment and prepared to return to base, Blake approached Maya one final time. He told her that he wanted her to know that what happened there that day would be remembered by these soldiers for the rest of their careers and that she had given them something valuable. Maya replied that they had earned it because they were willing to learn. Blake asked if they would see her again. Maya smiled, the first genuine smile Blake had seen from her all day, and said she thought Maya Johnson might develop an interest in advanced marksmanship training and might even become a regular there. Blake said he hoped she would. As Blake walked away, he heard Lieutenant Carter whisper urgently asking what he should put in the official report. Blake paused, considering his words carefully, and said to put down that they encountered a civilian consultant with exceptional natural ability, someone they would be working with on future training exercises. Carter asked if that was all. Blake looked back at Maya, who was helping Mitchell clean and secure the range equipment with the same methodical precision she had applied to everything else that day. He told the lieutenant that some secrets were worth keeping and this was one of them. As the military convoy pulled away from Riverside Range, Maya Johnson finished cleaning the last rifle and thanked Mitchell for his patience. She walked to her Honda Civic, started the engine, and drove home to her quiet apartment where she would resume her life as an ordinary civilian. But every Tuesday morning, she would return to the range, and every Tuesday, she would help train the soldiers who protected her country, passing on skills that officially she had never learned to men and women who would never know her real name. It was, she thought as she drove through the afternoon sunlight, a perfect arrangement. The only sound was the gentle hum of her car engine and in the distance the fading echo of gunshots from soldiers who were already better marksmen than they had been that morning. Some secrets, Maya reflected, were worth keeping, and some instructors never needed to know they were learning from a ghost. The Tuesday sessions became legendary among the 10th Mountain Division, though none of them ever spoke about them outside their unit. Word spread quietly through military circles about a civilian consultant who could teach impossible shots and techniques that were not found in any manual. Maya Johnson had found her place in the world, hidden in plain sight, teaching the next generation of warriors while maintaining the cover that kept her safe. It was exactly what she had never known she was looking for.